Welcome back to the video series in which we show you different aspects of the CLI-MIC pedagogical plan. In this video, we will concentrate on the part of the pedagogical plan that addresses the focus on perspective. Let's get started. In other videos, more precisely in the one dealing with the focus on scenario, the term perspective has already been mentioned. This time, however, when we talk about perspective, we are referring to the expression of a particular point of view. Broadly speaking, the position from which something is expressed or narrated in a comic strip or long story. So, we already know that in order to analyze information presented in the comic, we first need to figure out who is speaking. But to talk about perspective, it is necessary to consider that narrative analysis in comics establishes a useful differentiation between two elements, or more precisely, between two entities in different positions. Number one, who narrates, that is, who tells the information, and number two, who perceives or filters the information. While the first entity receives the name of the narrator, to address the second one, we will be talking about the perspective. If you dive into the narratological aspects of a comic, you will most likely encounter the term focalization. Perspective and focalization might address similar issues in a comic, but there is a slight difference between them. On the one hand, as explained before, perspective refers to the position from which something is expressed or narrated in a comic. On the other hand, focalization refers to the position from which the narrated information is perceived, and is, therefore, restricted to the person's experience of what is being told. This subtle difference between expressing and perceiving will further be discussed in the following part: who is speaking, who is feeling, whose experience is being told. Comics are likely to have a narrative voice that usually appears in captions. Very often, captions appear in rectangular boxes separated from the rest of the panel. This voice in the captions might not be part of the plot and usually relates the events unfolding in the panels from an outside perspective. It usually signals to a specific time and space, which is the so-called indexical information. However, comics can also show a narrative voice that belongs to the voice of one of the characters of the story. In this case, this narrative voice does take part in the plot. Thoughts and emotions play a fundamental role in comics as they become the center of the story. So the question is, how do we find out who is speaking, who is feeling something, or whose experience is being told? Mental states are commonly manifested, for example, through visual bodily features of the characters. Some thoughts and desires cannot be expressed in a comic through visual elements. That is why they are conveyed either in the dialogue or through thought balloons, which, in contrast to the tails or pointers of speech balloons, have several circles pointing towards the character who is thinking. In addition, the comic displays emotional and mental states through so-called pictorial runes. They are small icons that express pain, anger, etc., and are usually placed in close proximity to the character that is going through different experiences and feelings. To summarize what has been said so far, the emotional center of experience determines the perspective of the narrative. The emotions in the comics are largely expressed through visual elements, although it is important for each specific case to establish how the visual is coordinated with the verbal mode, which is more present in the captions and in the speech balloons. Let's move on to the next item of the chapter, focus on perspective. the art of interchanging perspectives. In this part, we will talk about the visual and verbal negotiation in the comic. Perspectives can be related in a very productive way through different modalizations of the three main components of a comic: the captions, the dialogues, and the visual content. These three components establish the verbo-visual discourse of a comic, in addition to the visual page and panel structure. How can the captions, the dialogues, and the visual content relate to the narrative perspective? Regarding perspective, there are three aspects or possibilities that we would like to point out. Number 1. The perspectives of the verbal and visual message can be coherent. Number 2. The perspectives are incoherent. This can be, for example, a caption that indicates that the visual content of the panel is false. And number 3, a caption can indicate the point of view from which a character's statement or actions must be considered. By analyzing captions and visual content, we can understand, for instance, that a caption can verbally confirm the accuracy of the visual content of the panel, or indicate that a character's statements or actions must be considered from a certain point of view, or the information of the caption might be in contradiction to the visual content of the caption. Comics also open a wide range of possibilities for integrating different spaces, timelines, opinions, and so on, by using colors or modifying the style of drawing, as shown in these examples. This verbo-visual discourse is not necessarily a simple affirmation of a statement. It can also be a discourse that integrates different perspectives, commentary, irony, and humor. Humor can be introduced both in visual representations and in the characters' dialogues or monologues. It is important to highlight that the use of humor in a comic does not mean a simplification or infantilization of the content, but creating certain kinds of expectations that draw attention to the complex discourse on the climate emergency, often by making it more enjoyable. This is the end of the video on the chapter Focus on Perspective. For more information, please check the CLI-MIC Pedagogical Plan, where you will find a more detailed explanation of these topics. With the material gathered in these videos, we hope to have given you the tools to start your journey into the world of comics.